Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In particular, I'd like to show you what I've done in relation to player characters giving orders to companions. So as you can see, I've set up a combat here. We've started. Companion 2 has retreated a little bit because they have sort of fairly low hit points. And it's my go, the player character's go. So let's say that I want to tell this, this player character to charge at the enemy and attack them hand to hand. So I have a given order option, so I'll choose that one. And I choose that particular companion. And I get a long success, which gives a total of 4, and that is enough to have them obey the order. So next time this companion acts, instead of possibly moving away, they should obey the charge order, which means see if there's any enemies that aren't hovering, and if there are, charge at them and attack them hand to hand. If you don't remember what hovering is, or if you're new to this series, most of the enemies that you will face in this game are sort of flying. They're giant mosquitoes. The theme of the game is an invasion of giant mosquitoes into a modern city. And enemies that are not injured, that haven't yet taken damage, are considered to be hovering. So that means that they are, you can't attack them hand to hand, because the idea in the fiction of the game is that they are sort of hovering just above your head, kind of just out of your reach, I guess. Not so much just above your head, just out of your reach. When they're damaged, they come to earth. I'm not sure what the fictional justification for that is. Maybe they get into fight mode or something, or maybe it's sort of the damage kind of stuffs up their wings or something so they can't fly, but either way, you have to damage them first before you can attack them hand to hand. And so if you want to charge and attack them hand to hand, that's why you need to check whether they are hovering before you do that, because there's no point charging and then finding that they're out of your reach. So when Companion 2 acts next, we should see that, well, I've still got my 2 orders, so I'll just advance and retreat, because giving an order doesn't count as an action. You can only do it once per turn, but it doesn't count as one of your 2 actions. So I'll just advance and retreat to use up my actions. And when Companion 2 acts, which will be after this one, we find that, yes, they do look and see if there are any non-hovering enemies. And we find that, no, they couldn't find any. And that makes sense, because neither enemy 1 nor enemy 2 has taken any damage yet. So we have to code, we still have to code sort of what the consequence of that is. In this case, it would probably mean that the companion would just use the default behavior. If there's nothing for them to charge, they will just act in the default way until there is someone for them to charge. Even though they've accepted the order, it won't affect their behavior. So let's look at the code that allows this to happen. There is a single new variable, because when you give a companion an order and they accept it, that remains the case until the end of the combat. And so we need a variable to keep track of that. And because each companion can have his own order, it's not a single variable, it is an array. And the name of the array is $order. So we have order name, which is just the text of what the different orders are called. And then we have $order, and it keeps track of, so order 2 will keep track of companion 2, and order 1 will keep track of companion 1. If there were more companions, the same thing would apply. Slot 3s for companion 3 and so on. And if it has a value that's not 0, that value is what order this companion will try to follow. So in other words, Or for example, if order 2 had a value of 3, that would mean companion 2 will try to fall back. The player character or the player had chosen to issue that order and to that companion, and it had worked. The companion had accepted the order. So we need that variable. So let's look at how we update $order. It's fairly straightforward. I've talked about this page before, so I won't go through every line, but just remember that Z is which companion is being given the order and Y is which order. So if the order is successful, I should say, by the way, that I made a mistake in, I had a long success as only counting as 1 for some reason. I just mistyped it, and it should have counted as 2. So I have fixed that. But anyway, if the companion in question obeys the order, we set order Z to have a value of Y. If they don't obey the order, we don't need to update anything. Things just stay as they are. And then what do we need to do? Well, we do a couple of line breaks, which we always do after text. We set print underscore dist equal to 1. That variable stands for print distance, and it means that we need to print all the distances and where everyone is. So it'll say distance 4, and that'll say enemy 3, enemy 2, or whatever's at distance 4, and so on. And then we set $actions plus plus. $actions, $actions, is how many actions the acting character has left. So why would we want to increase it by 1? Well, the answer is because we have this button that says continue. It's going to take us to the next action passage. As you can see, there's lots of arrows going to next action because every time someone attempts an action, whether it succeeds or fails, once we've finished processing it, if the combat continues, we just go to next action. And the first thing that does is reduces actions by 1. And we don't want actions to reduce by 1 if you're issuing an order, because that doesn't count as an action. And so we increase it by 1 here, and that will, of course, mean that it ends up at its original value, which is what we want. So that's giving the order, but of course we need to code for obeying the order. Well, that is in the passage companion. Again, I've shown you most of this, so I'll just talk about the basic structure of it and these 2 lines, which are the 2 new lines. So if the companion is prone, they will stand up, and that will be their action. And that's true whether they have an order or not, because for any order, the first stage is to stand up if you've been knocked prone. You can't sort of do any of the things that you're trying to get people to do if they're lying on the ground. And so regardless of anything else, if you're prone, stand up, and that's your action. Now down here, we have the default behavior where they find the nearest enemy, they choose a random attack, they see whether that attack can hit the nearest enemy. If so, they make the attack. If not, they move forward or back. But we don't want them to do the default if they've received an order. So we're going to have a series of else ifs in here. At the moment, we only have one, which says else if order $ini underscore who, which stands for initiative who, or who has initiative. It's whoever's acting currently. And if we're on this passage, it's a companion. We only go here if it's a companion. If the relevant slot in the order array is equal to 1, which is the charge order, then we're going to include the page charge. And we're going to have a series of these, one for each order. If it equals 2, then we're going to include something else. If it equals 3, and so on, and if it equals 4, which is the four orders. But at the moment, we've only partially completed one order, so we only have that one. Now, I didn't have to have a separate page charge because we're only going to access that page from this one page. So instead of having that page, all of the code that I've put in charge, I could have just put here instead of having the include. And it would have worked in exactly the same way. I decided not to do that because I have found that having more passages, and each of the passages has less code, I find that a bit easier to see what's going on, and I find it a bit easier to explain what's going on, compared to if you have fewer pages, but each page has more code on average. Of course, that's a purely personal thing. As I say, it will execute exactly the same. It's just whatever you find easier, and I happen to find that easier. So let's look at what happens. If their order is 1, if they've been ordered to charge and they've accepted that order, we're going to go here. So we need to find whether there are any non-hovering enemies, and if so, how close are they? If they're close enough to hit, we'll hit them. If they're further away, we'll go towards them. And if there aren't any, then we'll sort of ignore the order for now and just do default behavior until and unless that changes. So we set Z equal to 100, and we have a little note which says if Z is equal to 100, this means there are no non-hovering enemies. And if Z is anything else, this means that the closest non-hovering enemy is Z range bands away. Why have we set Z to 100? Because that's well over the maximum distance that any enemy is going to get from any companion. There's nothing in the code that literally stops it. So I suppose you could get to 100 distance if you did certain things with the code as it is. But I am going to implement some limits to how far away things can get, because if the groups get sufficiently far away, really the combat is over. One side has successfully escaped. The other side either can't catch them or has chosen not to, and the combat should end. So I am going to actually set a limit to how far away they can get, but I haven't done that yet. But practically speaking, nothing will get 100 range bands away now anyway. So if it's 100, we can be sure that that just means we haven't found any yet. So how do we find the correct value for Z? Well, it's pretty straightforward. There's one fairly long bit of code here, but it makes a lot of sense once I explain it. It's fairly straightforward. So it's a for loop. It goes from 1 to enemy underscore max. That means the maximum number of enemies, the maximum number that you can face in a given combat, which I think is currently, I think it's 15, but anyway, it doesn't matter. And for each of those enemies, we're going to ask two things. We're going to say, is enemy Y2 greater than 0, and is enemy Y4 equal to a capital N? So what does that mean? Well, enemy Y2 is the hit points of the given enemy. And so is it greater than 0? Well, that really means, is the enemy alive? So if it's not greater than 0, that means that either it's an enemy that you have faced in this combat but you've already killed, or it means that you were never facing that enemy in the combat. We're looking at slot 13, for example, and there's only 6 enemies, something like that. So there was never any enemy in that slot. What is enemy Y4? It is a text variable that is to do with whether they're hovering. If it's a capital Y, they're hovering. If it's a capital N, they're not. We only want the ones that are capital N's. We want living non-hovering enemies. If that's the case, we set Z equal to math.min bracket $Z, comma, math.abs bracket enemy Y3 minus com I and I underscore who 3 and end bracket, end bracket. That sounds quite complicated, but I will break it down. It's pretty simple. So first thing, we've got set Z equals math.min. That means that we're going to have some variables or formulas or both separated by commas. You can have as many as you like. When I use this command, I usually have 2, but there's nothing to say that it has to be 2. It can be, you can have 10 if you want. And we just calculate all of them and pick the smallest, and then set, in this case, $Z to be equal to that smallest value. There's a different command called math.max, which is the opposite. It's look at all of them and find the highest. In this case, we want the smallest. And we can see that we set Z equal to math.min Z or something else. So that means essentially set Z equal to either the current value of Z or this other thing here. In other words, if this other thing here is smaller than Z, reduce Z to be that what's in here. So what's in here? Well, it is another math command. It's math.abs. And that is the absolute value of whatever's in the brackets. In this case, we can't have multiple. We can't do stuff like that as we could with math.max or math.min. We have to have a single formula or variable or number or whatever. And all it means is if it's a positive, or if it's 0 or a positive, leave it as it is. And if it's a negative, multiply it by -1. So 0 stays as 0, 5 becomes 5, stays as 5, but -3 becomes 3. So the absolute value of something is very useful for finding distances between things. So for example, let's say you have something at position 3 and something else at position 5. You might say, well, we'll find the distance by the first one minus the second. But 3 minus 5 is -2. And what does a distance of -2 mean? For most purposes, that doesn't mean anything. 0 is the minimum that a distance can be. So if we use absolute values, that will make sense. 3 minus 5 is -2, but then because we're saying the absolute of that minus that, it just becomes 2. So what are the two things that what is the formula that we're finding the absolute value of? Well, it is NME Y3 minus com INI underscore who 3. Well, NME Y3 is just the position of a given enemy. Enemy something 3 is the position of a given enemy, and we are dealing with enemy Y. And com something 3 is the position of a given companion, and we are dealing with companion number INI underscore who. So all this means is take one, find the enemy's position, subtract the companion's position, then if it's a negative number, turn it positive, and that'll be the distance between the two, and we set Z equal to the smaller of its current value or the distance between these two, this enemy and this companion. And because Z starts at 100, and because this is always going to be less than 100, the first time we have an enemy that satisfies this requirement here, this if and, well, it will reduce because the distance will be smaller than 100, and so this distance will be the smaller out of Z and the formula, and therefore it will reduce to that value. And then we just close off the if and close off the for loop. So having done that to every enemy, we will either have Z has a value of 100, in which case we know that there are no non-hovering enemies that this companion can charge, even though they want to charge, even though they've obeyed the order. There's no target for them. Otherwise, the nearest non-hovering enemy is Z range bands away, and then what they're going to do is either attack that enemy if it's 0 or 1 range bands away, because that's the range of a sort of close, a hand-to-hand attack, or if it's more than 1 range band away, they're going to move towards it. And that is what we'll be doing in the future videos. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this, but if there aren't any enemies for them to charge, they'll just do the same as if they didn't have any order. They'll sort of use the default behavior. So that is what we will be working on in videos to come. We'll finish the charge one, and then we'll start adding the other orders. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.